Well, you're in a wonderful position to evaluate what's coming out of neuroscience because you've studied it
Yes.
in detail.
Yes.
Is the rest of the legal profession in a position to make use of those good changes?
Well, not yet, because it really requires two things. It requires an adequate understanding of the neuroscience, including its limits, and it requires an adequate understanding of law. Now, the law professors and lawyers obviously understand the law pretty well, but they don't understand the neuroscience very well at all, which leads them to make the inflated claims. And on the other side, the neuroscientists make inflated claims because they don't understand the law.
So, brain overclaim syndrome, what kind of a syndrome is that?
Well, there was what I call a lot of neuro-law exuberance starting around 2000. Neuroscience is going to change the justice system. It's going to make it kinder, gentler, greener, and everything else in the world. And I took the position, it's just not so. That these people are making vastly overinflated claims about what neuroscience can really do for us today. Most of what we know today, and I don't know what's going to come out of the laboratories tomorrow, but most of what we know today is scarcely legally relevant.
Is there anything in your experience or your studies that would lead you to think that there's a reason to consider what's going on in somebody's head as something we ought to worry about if we decide they're guilty or innocent?
Well, yeah, because what we think is that mental states like, did this person intend what he did? Was he suffering from a major mental disorder when he did it? These are things that are going on in someone's head. So if neuroscience, better understanding of the brain, can help us understand those psychological phenomena better, that would be a great help to the law. There's something else worth saying. If there's a difference between how the brain looks and how the behavior looks, for legal purposes, you always have to believe the behavior. Because, let me give the analogy of back pain, and hold aside someone who is malingering for a minute. Here's what we know. There are people who have miserable looking backs on X-ray or on MRI who have no pain.
Right.
Then there are people who have great looking backs and really have pain.
Or you have something wrong with your back that's clear to see in an MRI scan, but you function okay.
Right.
So should you get an operation on the basis of the scan or on how you function?
Right.
So now let's apply that to the courtroom.
Right.
And say this person has wiring that's all screwed up in the pictures, but they have behaved normally up until now, and then they took a week to figure out how to kill their wife. Should we treat them as though they're damaged and let them off, or should we treat them on the basis of the behavior? Is that sort of the area we're talking about?
That is precisely right.
Let me ask you about the case that we have, this make-believe story that we have in our show, where this young man, at the urging of his friends, finds himself in the store with a loaded pistol, holding up the shopkeeper. Because somebody enters the room, he swings around thinking he's being threatened, and at least he says he thinks he's being threatened, and he fires and wounds her severely in the head. Would you say there's anything about his state of mind, that he's 18, that his brain isn't fully developed, that he's more impulsive, that would have some bearing on the fact that he swings around and fires?
You know, if you are impulsive, it seems to me your rationality is impaired, at least in those conditions in which you are impulsive. And that, to me, ought to be a good mitigating factor. Because think about the insanity defense. The reason we're mitigating people who are legally insane is because they're not capable of rationality. That's why we don't hold responsible or hold to be legally incompetent people with severe dementias. Young children, we don't hold responsible, not because they don't act intentionally, it's because we think their rational capacities are not yet fully developed. You know, we set a bright line at 18. Now, what we know, of course, is some 25-year-olds look like 13-year-olds and some 13-year-olds look like 25-year-olds. But that has to be assessed behaviorally, because an 18-year-old who's really immature, I don't care why he's immature. He is immature. What the science can't do is tell us how to live together. That's for us to decide, not for scientists. They can tell us about us, they can teach us everything about us that they know, but they can't tell us how to live together.